في أكبر الكتب.
Congratulations, you have found the Lambcast, the official podcast of the large association of movie blogs, also known as the Lamb. The Lamb is the largest collective of online movie blogs and podcasts with 2,000 members and counting. Every week on the Lambcast, various members of the Lamb community get together to talk about our favorite subject, movies. So bookmark the Lamb and follow us on social media. Be sure to join us each week to hear a lively discussion of films and movie-related talk from our members. Join the flock at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lambcast. This is episode 809, and I'm your host, Richard Kirkham from Kirkham A Movie A Day. The movie of the month for April has traditionally been a franchise episode, but since we changed up things a little bit in the last year by designating particular genres for each month, we're going to dispense with the franchise requirement this year and stick to a single film for today's discussion. We had a choice of 5 different animated films from the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, and the community chose 1982's The Last Unicorn. Now, this is not the first time that The Last Unicorn has been discussed on the show. It was covered quite thoroughly in our fantasy draft a couple of years ago, but there are details and lots of issues that probably deserve to be attended to more completely. This film seems to be a particularly beloved by the Lambcast community, and we're going to discover why. Joining us for this discussion are several lambs who have a great affinity for animated films and others who just have an affinity for being here once a month. First up, joining us is a fan of animated work, who everyone knows, Tony Cogan from Coog's Reviews and the Wicker Man podcast. Glad to have you with us on the show, Tony.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on.
Also joining us from Rachel's Reviews and the Hallmarkies podcast, she's pure of heart and capable of seeing unicorns when they present themselves. It's our friend Rachel Wagner.
Yes, so glad to be here.
Because it's movie of the month time, you know our buddy Matthew Simpson is going to be here from the Awesome Friday podcast, the Castadia Film and TV Critics Association, and his new project, Northern Reel. As always, welcome, Matthew.
As always, pleasure to be here.
And also joining us this week is another fan of animated films, the host and organizer of the Anthological podcast and the Fourth Dimension Shifting podcast, It's Time to Rewind, Bubbawheat.
Listen quickly.
The Last Unicorn from 1982 is a beloved animated fantasy film by Rankin Bass, based on the Peter S. Beagle novel about a unicorn who learns that she's the last of her kind, and she embarks on a quest with a bumbling magician and a woman to find others unicorns, facing the villainous King Hagrid and his Red Bull. This film is known for its beautiful, sometimes dark, hand-drawn animation, memorable songs from Jimmy Webb, and a star-studded voice cast, including Mia Farrow, Jeff Bridges, Alan Arkin, and Christopher Lee. We're going to start off with some general thoughts, and then we're going to go in whatever directions the guests want to go. We are going to try and, keep plot points abstract. And, it's an old film. It's more than 40 years old. I'm sure anybody who's interested has probably seen it, but we'll put up a little bit of a spoiler wall so that if there's a plot element that might be a surprise, we'll wait until after we warn people about that kind of thing. But like I said, we'll start with our general thoughts. Bubbawheat, I'm going to give you the honor of launching us on this discussion. What did you think of The Last Unicorn?
I mean, I love this movie. I was the one that's put this forward in the poll, so of course I'm gonna love it. I've known it for this is a film from my childhood. I was super invested back in, maybe about 20 years ago, whenever there was it seemed like a lot of progress on the live action version with Mia Farrow, Christopher Lee, and Angela Lansbury saying that they would return. And it's a beautiful, it's gorgeous animation. I love the songs by America. Like I still listen to The Last Unicorn and Man's Road, and it's I just love it.
It's nice to be enthusiastic about something. How old were you when you first saw it? Do you remember?
I don't remember. I mean, I was born in 1980, so this came out when I was two. So it was definitely like a video rental, it's
Sure.
something that I would often rent from our local family video. And yeah, it was a frequent rental. And even though I love this, I never actually owned it until much later whenever I got it on DVD.
All right. Well, Tony, how about you? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and your general thoughts about the film?
General background. Honestly, watching it for this podcast was the first time that I actually watched this film. This wasn't really like one of the anime films that I grew up watching. Like, look at like other films, animated films from 1982. Actually, it was a pretty decent year for animation, all things considered. Although, given my sensibilities, the one that I have the most affection for from that year, well, whether affection's the right way to describe it, but more memories of it is was the Plague Dogs. Make of that what you will. And but yeah, and this one more do more by reputation rather than actual what you I'd say kind of same thing with all of the Rankin Bass films. Like Rankin Bass was their productions weren't really a thing in the UK, at least when I was growing up. So I've known their stuff through like cultural osmosis more than anything else. And actually watching the film at the start, I was a bit uh, concerned at the start when seeing the credits scenes of the voice cast, seeing like Alan Arkin and Jeff Bridges in the cast. But I think that's more because I associate them with in my head with what they sound like in the more recent for like the two thousands of the lack of a better phrase like grouchy old man archetype that I have imagined for those two. So it did take me a bit of a while to get used to them in this one, but when I actually sit down watching it, just letting it absorb over me. This is a really beautiful film. It's not just like a proper classic fairy tale story. Like it's more focused on like atmosphere and mood rather than necessarily the plot to some extent. And actually, as a fairy tale experience, I can easily see this hitting people of a certain age, being a younger age. It's been the favorite film for a lot of people as they grow up. And I've found that if you watch it at exactly the right age, then this actually is playing one that having a really big impact on people. And yeah, I'm essentially the animations really, especially you can definitely tell the Japanese influence from a lot of the animators went on going to work for Ghibli. And yeah, it's just really, really beautiful film on the whole.
That seems enthusiastic for a first time viewing. I like that. Rachel, this wasn't your first time seeing it, was it?
No, I'd seen it. The last time I watched it was 2020. I did a review on my blog back then, and it was one I think that we did watch, but I was just never really that into fantasy stories when I was a kid. My mom would try and try and try. She would read us Lord of the Rings. She really wanted us to get it, but I just was never into that kind of storytelling. I preferred things like I don't know, like Little Women and stuff like that, Anna Green Gables. That was my jam. And as far as animation, it's a really interesting time period of animation because I mean, Disney they went all the way from 1981 Fox and the Hound till 1985 The Black Cauldron with nothing, and so it was just this very weird and era for animation. You think of like the experimental films that were released then, like Plague Dogs, you were saying, Secret of Nim. You had Don Bluth, starting his company, and so I think you'd include this in that sort of movement of the early '80s that we had, and I think I liked it more this time than I liked it in 2020. Um, I think I thought it was a little bit boring in 2020, and I don't know if I was just in a better mood today. But it is very beautiful, and it's unique, and it feels fresh, and the songs are very pretty. So yeah, it's not like a nostalgic favorite of mine, just because of who I was as a kid, but I I do think it's a nice little film.
And Matthew, did you have unicorns painted on your bedroom wall when you were a child because you loved this movie so much?
I didn't. Um, but my story with this film is actually pretty close to Bubbawheat's. I was born in 1981. We had this on a VHS that my dad, I think he dubbed it from a rental because we had two VCRs when I was a kid, and there was a VHS that had this and two or three other animated films on it that we basically wore out. Um, so yeah, I've seen this movie an uncountable number of times as a child, and I've seen it twice in the past. According to Letterboxd, I've watched it twice, including yesterday, in the past 8 years or so. And my opinion today remains the same as it did the last time I watched it, which is that it's a beautiful film. It's full of nostalgia for me. It reminds me of my childhood very much. And I like just everything about it is very sweet. Um, and the only the only thing that's really different about my reaction as an adult from my reaction as a child is that when I was a child, the Red Bulls scared the crap out of me, and it no longer does that. So
Does it give you wings, though?
no.
Well, that sometimes is a problem. You watch a movie and you realize when I was a child, a lot of things were frightening.
Yeah.
When you're an adult, completely different things are frightening. You know, when you
Yeah.
were a kid, the bill showing up didn't scare you at all. When you're an adult, that's the thing that's giving you the frights.
True story. True story. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, my history of this film is long and storied. I think I watched it. It came out in 82. We probably had it on VHS by at least like 86. So yeah, I've watched it many, 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 many times, and it remains like it's a beloved animated classic, and I think it's fine, a fine movie that I have great nostalgia for. So it's and the thing that strikes me when I watch it now is similar to what Tony was saying, that like I don't have a problem with it exactly, but the first time I hear Schmendrick, I'm always like, wow, Alan Arkin sounds like a young man, and I just have a hard time picturing him.
Well, younger man anyway at that point.
Yeah, I think he's like 40 or something at that 40-ish. But
Yeah.
yeah, it definitely sounds different than what I associate to him.
Well, my history with the film is pretty much what you would expect. I'm older than you guys. My kids were born in 86 and 88. And I had two little girls, and as soon as they knew there was a movie about unicorns, they wanted to see it. And of course, it was one of those things that I rented. I think I eventually bought it on VHS. In fact, I think I still have the VHS. I may go over to my storage unit and look around for it if I get to it before the illustrated podcast goes up. I'll include a picture, but I know that we had it and they watched it routinely. I was not, I watched it with them the first time, and then after that, I was happy to walk through the room and sit down for 5 minutes and then get up and leave. It wasn't something that I thought was compelling. I don't think I've seen it for 15 or 20 years, but I realized that I didn't have a handy copy. I was thinking about looking online and renting it and streaming it someplace. And then I said, well, what the heck? I should have that in my collection. So I bought a steelbook copy on the Blu-ray this week, had it delivered the next day, and watched it. And holy criminy, this movie is stunning looking. It is just incredibly beautiful. The drawings are so intricate and nice and lovely. I could stare at them for hours. No wonder people were hypnotized by this film at the time. I do think that the animation is a little limited. It's got a kind of a TV style to the animation. Rankin Bass, was and the Japanese companies that they worked with probably were working on a budget, and so they had a limit in the number of frames that they could produce. And you'll notice that the mouths don't always move in conjunction with the voices, but that's a minor detail. As I'm watching the movie, it flows very smoothly. The images on the screen are completely lovely. I have some issues with some of the things that people have talked about. We'll talk about the voice actors and their performances and the songs in a little bit, but this is a movie that I thoroughly enjoyed watching again. And I think it's my oldest daughter's favorite movie from her childhood. I'm not even sure. I couldn't say it's her favorite movie. I'm going to talk to her later today. I'm going to ask her and find out because I think it's one of those movies that she really loved. And my youngest daughter, who lives here with me, or I live with her, I should say, she watched it with me the other day and she remembered it well and was equally enthusiastic about the film. So I think we had a good winner this week or this month for Movie of the Month. We've picked something that people will enjoy watching and hopefully you'll enjoy talking a little bit more about. Did anybody have a particular thing that they wanted to get started with on talking about the film?
Well, I just think the animation is very, very beautiful. It the way that they use light and color, in particularly in the animation of the unicorn and her transformation, is really pretty.
And I always forget how much boobs there are in this movie for
Yeah,
it being
Yeah, that's
oh,
G
fair.
rated.
for G's film like that, like the tree.
The Zoftig tree that is embracing
Like,
Schmedrick.
I'm thinking like the section of for animated films of that year. You expect that like that tree to be more in line from the wall rather than a fancy film.
That's true. I could see that.
Yeah, you
Well, I
got
think,
the tree, the harpy, and naked Amalthea when she first transforms.
It's true.
And when she
it's not
transforms back, yeah.
not
The whole
quite risque, but you do notice that she's not wearing anything.
I mean, I still think the Red Bull looks very striking. It might not be scary to an adult, but it still looks very
Well,
I think
what you said about
memorable.
the colors, Rachel, I think is especially true. There are some deep hues in the
Yeah.
early part of the film that are just, you know, they draw you in, and then some things pop. The Red Bull pops. It's not, and it's more a crimson red than it is a fire truck red. It's a little darker, and the shade of it is very interesting, and I think it works well with the kind of the flame motif that comes along here and there. It's very striking and except for the human characters, I think everything in the film looks spectacular. The human characters are much more in the tradition of the previous Rankin Bass kinds of
Yeah.
films that
mm,
we've seen. They're interesting and unique, but they are a little weird looking, so to
uh,
speak.
little cartoony, little 70s
Uh,
cartoony.
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, but I
Um,
Ro-
do
but
think
I,
the princess looks like it looks like the unicorn. They did a good job of making it look like that she was the transformation of that unicorn.
it also works with that thing because this kind of like white use for like human mafia and when it comes to unicorn, it's there's not I don't really seeing that same shade of white for any other like character or any other environments used in the film aside from when we see the other unicorns and this and the sea in the film. It gives that like otherworldly quality that really helps sell the fantasy of the unicorn.
Do you think
Yeah.
the white caps of the waves give
Yeah,
away that the unicorns are there? Because that's what we're looking for.
yeah.
Well, and a
I think
lot of
everything we're
times,
talking about is very on point. I think that the Red Bull is like it's red, but if you like pause the film or just even just look up stills, like there's a lot of like oranges and pinks and like deep purples, and its eyes are this like yellow color. Like it's such a an amazing tapestry of color, and it really pops against the predominantly, usually when it's on screen, like blue or green background. And I think the same is true of the unicorn herself, who like Tony was just saying, like the sort of whites and creams and like very light grays that she's rendered in, and also affect the environment in both their cases. They both have this like ethereal glow around them that lights the environment. And I think because they pop against the background so far, they very beautifully represent sort of these opposite ideals. It's a gorgeous thing to watch. Like there's
yeah.
I feel like we're going to be repeating like it is beautiful a lot this episode.
Well, and
Yeah,
a big problem that they had during this era of animation was the pupils and making the pupils on the eyes look weird. But they did a pretty good job with this one of when the human characters, even though they look somewhat, made for TV. They don't look super, super slick. Um, but I wasn't distracted by the pupils. The eyes look pretty good.
And I just also seem like
Also, like,
the ice as well kind of work to sell like the positive of Amalfi being this from another world because at least to me, like you can definitely tell the Japanese influence through Amalfi having more
Yeah,
like traditional anime eyes compared to the other characters.
yeah, that's true.
Well, and
Yeah, I
especially with
guess
her
that
like,
this
yeah, like
team went
big
on
purple
to
ones.
I guess this team went on to do Nausicaa, a lot of the team I was reading. And
Yeah.
that makes sense. You can see that.
So
yeah,
this
and
team
a
went on
lot
to
of the
do
back.
Nausicaa, and then also like the core members of the team went on to form Studio Ghibli. So yeah,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can see
yeah,
that it's very easy to see that timeline of their work.
definitely.
And a lot of the backgrounds I think echo or they're clearly inspired by like medieval tapestries, and I like that, and it also like really gives a different style for the era.
Not to put it on the same level, but earlier, I guess it was last year, the movie Death of a Unicorn featured some of the tapestries that probably have been seen in art books all around the world. And I thought maybe these are the same kinds of images that inspired this particular film because there was one particular shot when they do a transition that has that tapestry look to it that I thought I've seen that 100 times before, I'm sure. And I'm not familiar enough with the art to be able to say who it is and where I've seen it, but I know it was very familiar.
I mean, I think that's especially true in the opening credits, which are basically like, you know, not so much an animated sequence as it feels like a camera panning over these medieval tapestries, with the sort of traditionally drawn like lions and other animals, especially. Um, yeah, no, my train of thought just derailed. Sorry.
That's okay.
But yeah, no, I think what we're talking about is it's all again just it's gorgeous, and I think what you're right with the backgrounds are all beautifully rendered, and often it's interesting. It's definitely a style you see, but like the backgrounds and in some cases foregrounds are often rendered in um, much more detail than the characters themselves, which sets them apart a little bit, and not in a bad or distracting way. It's just an interesting stylistic choice.
Well, and also there's a nice contrast between the background and the characters, and also the unicorn slash Amalthea and the other characters. Is there is like a purposeful shabbiness to a lot of the characters. Like you can see the seams, like you can see how Schmendrick's hat is like patched, and most of the other characters like Captain Cully and Molly Grew, they all have this shabbiness to them, and of course like King Haggard's castle is old and decrepit as well, and I think they make a nice contrast between that and anything related to the unicorn.
I really appreciate that the reference to Old and Decrepit is about the film and not about the host today.
Well, one thing I do appreciate too that it being a Rankin Bass movie, their animated shorts, they're cute, for Christmas and whatever, but sometimes I feel like they can be a little too try hard for my taste, that they're like trying so hard to be quirky and, and different and it can be a little grating, but I didn't really feel like everything pretty much in this movie feels authentic to the setting and time and place. There wasn't, it can be, especially if somebody's trying to make a children's film, sometimes they can try too hard with like the comic relief and with the just to be quirky and especially like I said from Rankin Bass, and you really don't feel that. Like it all feels pretty serious and pretty grounded, which I appreciate.
All right. Well, I think Matthew kind of hinted at it. We can only repeat the phrase "it's beautiful" so many times before we run out of superlatives to throw at it. It is a good-looking film, and I think we've done a nice job trying to describe for people who haven't seen it why they should see it. Let's try some other subjects. I was a little concerned about the voice casting and the performances there, but before I give my thoughts on it, I want to see if anybody else had something in particular they wanted to say about any of the performers.
feel like for me with this voice cast, for me the highlight was Christopher Lee as Haggard. It's, like firstly just Christopher Lee just in I mean, obviously as someone who did a podcast on The Wicker Man, I'm obviously a fan of Christopher Lee. And I have to give him and kind of obligated to give him as much praise as I can when as well as what you also can tell that he is a massive fan of the book. Right? From what I heard, he brought a copy of the book with notes in it when he was to the recording sessions to make sure that the nuances of the character were captured right. And you really get the of someone who is just absolutely miserable, trying anything he can to create the even general idea of any form of happiness, no matter how fleeting or brief or cruel the happiness he creates can be, just to feel something. And this like that's kind of what this character that Christopher Lee does really well, and just like those phase he's doing at just at this time, he's sort of great voiceover works from Christopher Lee in like the 80s and 90s, things like this, or like his performances Death in the Cosgrove Hall Discworld adaptations. It's always great to like hear when Christopher Lee really gets into a character and really properly lets the emotional weight of the character really drive. And it's a great synthesis between the script, the animation, and the performance to make Haggard such an effective villain.
Well, I don't think there's going to be a lot of dispute, at least not on my end, that Christopher Lee's vocal performance is the strongest one in the film. But before I start critiquing the others, I want to give people a fair chance to offer their thoughts about Mia Farrow and Alan Arkin and Jeff Bridges.
I think it's just a creature of its time. We watch it and you think, "Yep, this feels very late '70s, early '80s." Sort of during that era, like a Captain and Tennille, Sandy Duncan, and with the Carpenters. Like that kind of a feel was in, and so you kind of have to view it in that context.
I don't know. I think that makes it sound. I don't know. I think it's not. I think it makes it sound a little worse than it is, to be honest.
Yeah,
Because
you're probably right.
so first of all, like, yeah, Christopher Lee is of everyone in the cast, his voice is the most timeless. So it's definitely going to last and resonate. I think that that is probably beyond dispute. Um,
Yeah.
I personally really enjoy Alan Arkin in this film. I know he sound like I mentioned before, he sounds a lot younger than I associate with him in, but like I think he really does a lot with the material in a way that perhaps Bridges in particular doesn't. I think he seems to understand the assignment a little better than some of the other performers. I think Mia Farrow has an ethereal and beautiful voice, which just fits the character, but I don't know that she's like really like doing a lot with it, if that makes sense. I don't know, maybe you might
She doesn't feel
disagree.
she doesn't feel invested in it very much to me. It feels quite a bit like she's just it's because she has an ethereal type voice and kind of this lightness to her tone. That's the casting, and they want the casting to do all of the acting in the part. And I thought that that was part of the problem. The casting is good, but it can't do everything. The actor has to bring something to the part as well. And I didn't really feel like she brought much to the part beyond just her vocal tone.
Yeah, and I sort of feel bad saying all of this because it's again like I don't think it's bad in any way, but um I do think that like the way she plays it sort of implies and I think they asked for this. It feels like they asked for this that that the last unicorn that is supposed to be sort of separate from the world, if that makes
Yeah,
sense. Like she's supposed
yeah,
to be
Yeah.
yeah.
an
That's
ele
yeah, that's the vibe I was getting as well.
right? And I feel like that does. I feel like her performance is going for that, and but I think at times it doesn't so much sound separated as it does disinterested. And I think that that's probably my only real concern with the vocal performances in the film, actually, is just that I feel like most of the time it's great, most of the time it's a good or great, and then occasionally it sounds like she doesn't really care to be there. And uh, and I think it's pretty nitpicky. I don't think it's very frequent. Um, I think it's definitely And I think the reason I say that they're asking for it is it's definitely worse in the beginning of the film and it gets better toward the end. Um, as the character learns and grows. I just don't think it quite resonates in the way that, for me at least, doesn't resonate in quite the way that is intended.
I think it's interesting they were able to get such a star-studded cast because that wasn't always the case in the 80s. It really is something that the 90s to have like the when you had like the Lion King and Aladdin and Toy
Like the
Story,
post Robin Williams gene.
the and you didn't have like, I mean, for instance, The Little Mermaid. I mean, it's all no names except for Buddy Hackett. And and so I don't know, it's kind of impressive that they were able for this, random animated film out of Japan that they were able to get these people.
Well, they must have hired Jeff Bridges and he only had half an hour, so he just read the script the first time through and they just plugged that in because holy criminy, this is I'm an admirer of Jeff Bridges. I've been a fan of his forever. He's Thunderbolt and Lightfoot was one of those films that I saw when I was a kid that I was really impressed with. He was great in The Last Picture Show. Just fantastic performer.
Ron.
And yeah, and then this film, it's like it's literally as if he's reading the script for the first time out loud.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
fair.
that's definitely something that I noticed
Yeah,
this
yeah.
watch. Prince Lear feels very modern compared to all the other voices. I think are fantastic. Even most of the smaller roles, like I love the butterfly, the cat, the skeleton. Rene Auberjonois. He is. It is. You know. Unicorn that is burned into my memory. And then Jeff Bridges is like telling a court magician, I can write you a good recommendation.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, also like some of the other like professional ones. It's always a delight when Paul Frees turns up in just in anything, and he's clearly having a blast with Brooke and as the cat. It's very like it's a very Paul Frees performance. So don't kind of sorry, but you're familiar with all the stuff Paul Frees has done, you know what's like with him, and yeah, Andy Lau was great. But I mean, as far as and the stuff we've said about Jeff Bridges' acting is, his singing is worse.
Does
Yeah,
he
and
sing
one
in
one
this?
trivia,
I'm trying to
yeah,
remember.
yeah, the love song. And they have the duet. And one thing that I always, this piece of trivia that I heard, and then once I read it, I always hear it, is that they actually had a soundtrack that had Mia Farrow doing her song, and in the soundtrack for some reason, like she actually sings it well, and in the movie version, she's like off key, and I
Well, the thing is,
can't
I've actually
unhear
like
it.
got the page for the soundtrack up, and in the at least for the soundtrack, it was Katie Irving who performed the songs, not Mia Farrow. That may be the reason.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Jeff Bridges not singing well. I've actually seen Jeff Bridges and his band in concert, and he's perfectly fine. I own one or two albums that he did, but it's not a style that's at all compatible with what's going on in this particular film.
Well, he did that Crazy Heart, didn't he?
Yeah, no, he was
Yeah,
great in
that
that.
one, yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah,
Mm,
Jeffrey's like country. That sounds like more harsher tones, if that's the right phrase for it. That fits his voice.
Grittier,
That
you know.
yeah, grittier. That fits his
Yeah.
vocal range. This more like traditional like ballad style that doesn't fit. I mean, it's not quite the same extent, but it gives that same kind of vibe. Like Russell Crowe, decent like rock singer, terrible like Broadway style singer when he did Les Mis. It's a
Right.
case of like someone who's a good singer, but not for the type of singing that's required.
Well, and
Like,
I think the music is a creature of its time. Like I was saying, it has that feel of those sort of folk songs of the adult contemporary of that era.
well, Jimmy Webb is, far be it from me to ever criticize Jimmy Webb. I don't think there's anything wrong with any of the songs or the music,
Oh,
but I'm not always sure that the tone was the right choice for some of the scenes that they do. The love songs are good, and I think I love the opening song too. You know, I'm Alive. I think that that works really well. Other songs not quite as strong, and America is a soft rock band. They have accomplished, you know, discography. I've enjoyed many of their performances. I just felt unmoved by most of the songs in this, not because the songs were bad, just because I don't think that they were performed in a very strong way, and I'm not sure what it is that's holding me back on it, but I just was underwhelmed by what should be one of the key components of a film. A lot of these animated films in the 80s, like Rachel was talking about before, especially the early Disney films, they are lucky to have a song. It's not until the Renaissance that happens a few years later that everything has
Yeah.
four songs, including two showstoppers and big productions that go along with it. These are all like their background information, background songs. They're
Yeah.
not performed as part of the scene, and the characters aren't engaged in it. It's just kind of this
It
no
reminded me of
no
the songs in The Rescuers. Like I thought a
yeah,
very similar style, and
I can see that.
you know.
Do you think that part of it might be that there is a bit of a tonal dissonance between the songs and the style of the movie? And I'm not
Yeah.
saying that it is. I'm just like thinking it out loud
Yes.
based on what you're talking about, that
No, I
like
agree with
the
that completely.
like the
Yeah.
70s sort of folk style doesn't necessarily fit with the sort of medieval fantasy style of the images.
Yeah,
And
it's too bad they couldn't have had like, Joe Hisashi or somebody like that that does the Ghibli going forward.
Where was
This
Donovan when they
movie,
needed him?
yeah, if this movie
yeah,
had
man.
that, like that would be very interesting.
And I was going to say that, like, I think what spurred this in my brain as we were speaking about it, is that I definitely felt that it had that sort of 90s Disney issue, which I know some people love and some people hate, and I find have mixed feelings about, which is that I felt like all the modern anachronisms in the way they speak really stuck out to me this time. Um, so, and I think it might just be that clash of tones, that clash of styles that is what is sort of setting us off on some of these songs. I think the songs are like, if you listen to the soundtrack, which I did yesterday, it's a great album. Like the
Yeah.
whole album is great. It just doesn't always, like Richard was saying, just doesn't always quite fit with the film. And
Yeah.
it's an interesting. I hesitate to say problem, but it's an interesting situation for the film.
Well, what else did you guys want to talk about? The only other things that I was thinking about talking about are story points and plot points. But if you have something other
Well,
than those things,
I think also just with the voice cast as well. There's another one I want to highlight is Tammy Grimes as Molly. I feel like
Mm.
it's like Christopher Lee, I feel like she's the one big performance of the film. Like, but when Molly first sees the unicorn, the amount of pain, grief, and regret that we hear through Grimes' performance really sells the character, really creates that connection with the character, and to me, is probably one of the emotional high points of the film.
I think that's a valid point to bring in because I do think that the longing to have had a unicorn appear in her life earlier and how she might have viewed the world differently as a result uh, kind of tells us why it is that the idea of a unicorn is important to the world, even if people haven't seen them, that there's something to dream about and long for, and that there would be something lost if in fact this is the last unicorn and they aren't going to be available to inspire or move or rescue people from their personal malaise. I like that scene very much. And I was not familiar with Tammy Grimes until I was watching this and I had to look her up and I go, oh, I see. She was quite accomplished and there's a whole bunch of, family connections here that suggest relationships to other movies that I thought, well, that would be interesting to follow up on. But I thought her performance was fine here.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you just like any movie, you have to acknowledge everything's a creature of their time.
Yes.
you know, but this doesn't mean it's bad.
No, no, not at all. Well, I think anybody who's listening, if you were concerned about plot issues, which I'm not exactly sure you should be worried about. This movie is less about plot and more about image and mood. But if you are worried about plot points, this is where we're going to dive into that discussion a bit. So if you want to keep the story pristine for your first experience, come back and listen to the show after you've watched the movie. Otherwise, we're going to plow ahead on those kinds of things. And I'm going to ask folks what they thought of how the story plays out and whether or not you think it works. I have a view of this that I think is typical of one of the reasons why I always hesitate to watch the Miyazaki movies and anime in general, but I'll wait and throw in my 2 cents after everybody else has had a chance to speak.
Well, I think, the main crux of the story, like the adventure is the best part. And then I do think that maybe it's a victim of having a shorter animated runtime. But I do feel like the love story and the end, like it just ends quickly. I always love, I love most the adventure of getting to the castle and then the adventure around the castle and the story of the Red Bull and, Mommy Fortuna. Those are all fantastic. And then we just kind of, uh, hit a roadblock as soon as we get to King Haggard's castle, and then we have this love story that kind of goes nowhere until it doesn't, and then the movie just ends in like 5 minutes, and we have these fight scenes on almost a TV animated budget, where you have this supposedly epic fight between the unicorn and the Red Bull, and all she does is, just kind of waggle her head at the Red Bull, and then that's enough to make him back into the water. But it's really all about the journey for me.
Well, I think the journey is pretty reasonable. I mean, it's an adventure film, and so you're going to go through travels as you are heading toward your objective, and you're going to run into the complications and a variety of characters. The characters, I think, are part of the problem. They're all interesting, but the context in which they occur, the length of time they're on screen, the reason for being there is often truncated. And it's probably a result of adapting a book to a movie that you have to make choices and you have limitations on time. Mommy Fortuna kind of is this character that is important and then is gone almost immediately. It's a short period of time that she's in the film, and I think that because there are other characters in that part of the story, it feels like there should be something more complete. Uh, Molly, the same sort of thing. We get that one good scene that gives us some background on her, but apparently, she's perfectly willing to detach from the captain at a whim. I mean, he's gone out of their life, and that's completely ended. I often
I
feel,
mean, they're even in a relationship because you can tell because of the carving
yeah,
in the tree of the CC plus MG.
yeah. And as I was saying before, one of the things I've only seen one or two of the Miyazaki films. I They have an odd look to them from my perspective. I'm used to a different kind of animation, and so I hesitated. When I was a kid, I watched some anime things, Astro Boy and Gigantor were things that were part of my childhood experience, but I always thought they were weird when I was watching them when I was a kid. And this has that same sort of feel to it, that there's something about the story that's a little bit incomplete for me, and I have to do a lot of filling in my head in order for everything to work. And I'm okay doing that, but it does feel different to me. And I don't want to say it's alienating, but it is certainly I react to it differently as a consequence. And I don't know if that's a negative thing in the long run, because as long as I'm still absorbed by the the look of the film and care about uh, the characters a little bit, I'm okay. But there are just times when it feels like I've skipped something. We've jumped to a conclusion. It's the well, at one point, the Jeff Bridges Prince is he's indifferent to what's going on, then he's in love, then he's going to kill somebody, and it's just like back and forth. There's no consistency to the character, and he's not really the son of the king. He is. It just there's a lot that's going on there that doesn't really do much for the plot and keeping things flowing. That's my perspective, and I know I'm on the outside on a lot of these things, but it just feels a little odd to me.
I mean, I don't personally, what am I trying to say? I think that the character design and all of that is very different in a way that I appreciate. I totally get what you're saying though. Like, I don't think you're almost certainly, even if you were alone on this podcast, I don't think you're alone. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Okay.
it is a different style. It is, in a lot of ways, and I think that it can be, um, for lack of a better way to say it, off-putting. But yeah, I don't think you're alone.
Well, I mean,
Even if I love the style, like it's, I get it.
you're not really like rooting for, they don't do that like hero narrative the way that you expect for this kind of fantasy film. So I think that maybe that's part of it, is that we don't get like super invested in just one kind of character in their journey. I mean, but you're just sort of following the events of all of these of this world. It's more of a world building kind of a thing than a hero's journey. I do think it's probably more effective the first half before she becomes human. I think it's probably more effective that first half, even though I think they did a good job designing the character to look the same. But yeah, I mean, you kind of just have to appreciate it as sort of it's like sprawling fantasy, of just of that genre.
Yeah,
I
and I
think
feel
that's a
like
good perspective on it.
and I feel like as I was said, it sounds that's strong fantasy, but also it's a fairy tale. It is more focused on atmosphere and
Yeah.
mood and tone rather than the actual plot. And I do with some of the scripts you had, like especially with Prince Lear, that is an element from what I looked up that was explained more in the book. It was what I read. There's a really great video by YouTuber Dominic Noble that just goes over all the differences between the book and the film, and the whole backstory of Prince Lear was something that was cut out for the script, and I feel if you like mentioning something that's if you read the book, maybe that include that bit in, could say more, but yeah, again, it's as I say, it's sort of that feels more based on atmosphere. You don't really, and if you go with it with the logic of a fairy tale rather than the logic of like a traditional fantasy, like story, like something less more along the lines like Tolkien or sort of along those lines. That's probably the best frame of mind to go into watching this film.
Well, I liked what I think he was saying before about the action scene at the end, where suddenly the unicorn is able to corner the bull, and I'm going, well, weren't there hundreds of unicorns there before? Why is this suddenly different? Why is this something that is a challenge that can be met, whereas it wasn't before? And we don't really have much context on that. And the king, his desire to watch the unicorns, and that's his only pleasure. That's okay, but it's a little weird and without much more context than that, it just feels a little strange. But I agree that it's really about atmosphere more than plot, which is perfectly fine. You got to have those kinds of stories too.
I
I
would
just,
chime in and say that I think it's also like a lot of the what you're talking about is implied in the film, but not
hmm
explicit. Like there's not a lot of like exposition. So
yeah,
for me, like the reason she's able to stand up to the bull is because she spent time as a human and she's like learned from Lear about being a hero and she's learned from her friends about love and loyalty and all of these things, and it gives her the strength to stand up to the bull. Um, and I think that that is all nonverbal storytelling. I think you have to sort of like think about it a little bit to get there, and I think it's not entirely successful because obviously we haven't all gotten there, and maybe I'm reaching. I don't know.
No, I like
Um,
that. I like that explanation quite well. In fact, I think if I watch the film again with that in my mind, I'm probably going to respond to it differently.
and I would say that like it goes further too, because one of my favorite details in this, having watched it again, a lot of times as a kid, but really only two or three times as an adult, and the thing I really picked up on this time is that the whole world is kind of ruined, right? Like we talked a little bit earlier about how characters have a shabbiness to them, how the castle is decrepit and ruined. And I think it's meant to be implied that that is because all the unicorns are gone, because Haggard has imprisoned all these unicorns. They're not in the world to help it be better and prettier and everything like that. Like, and I think Haggard is the ultimately the architect of his own unhappiness because he's imprisoned these unicorns and he can look out at the sea, but he can't like see them and interact with them and see what them doing existing in a way that would bring him joy, right? It's the same way that like seeing like an animal in the wild versus an animal in a zoo is a different experience. Um, and the latter of those definitely has diminishing returns, I would believe, for most people. Um, So I think that like the implication that he's trying to round up this magic to make himself happy, but in doing so, he's removing it from the world and making himself and everyone else kind of miserable. And I really like that in the last scenes, after everything is resolved and they all reunite at the end, like the world is, I mean, it's at night, so it's dark, but like the world does feel a little bit brighter in that moment to me. Um, I don't know, again, maybe I'm reaching on this kind of stuff,
Yeah,
but I
no, no,
think that
I think
yeah,
you
my
should have been writing the title cards that went along with this
but
film.
it's not, but I kind of like get coming from this at the same time. I think of it for me, like aside from like what we see with Haggard's Castle, it's with the introduction with Molly and with Captain Cuddy's gang of outlaws that we see. That's for me, that's the bit where that side of it really hits in, and it's also creates the idea of the nature of fantasy versus reality that we get the bit in the menagerie. Uh, I think it creates the perception of what the creatures are rather than the reality. But when we see that really clearly with me with Cuddy's camp, and we get the expectation of a gang of outlaws living in the woods, and we think, oh, this is a all romanticized element, but then they see that it's harsh. They're like stretching rat soup over multiple meals, having to water it down because they've not got much food. And it's essentially what we see here with Molly when she first sees the unicorn, and I feel like and get the implication that Molly was swept up in the romanticism of the outlaw lifestyle with Cuddy when she was younger, only to be hit with the harshness of reality. And so when Schmendrick conjures up the illusion of Robin Hood made marrying the merry men, all of the rest of Cuddy's band follow the illusion, is that because the reality is not what they expected, is what harsher. So they want to retreat. They want that fantasy. They want this perception, and here's that interesting idea of the need for fantasy and those elements in the world, and removing that element, having to expose just the harshness of the world, that's what's making the world a worse place. And by bringing the unicorns back in the end, that's allowing that magic and that fantasy to return and hopefully allow the world to recover.
I mean, I'm just glad I'm not
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah, another little detail that I saw on the IMDb trivia that's from the novel, which I don't think it would have fit in the movie, but I think it's a fantastic little detail, is that apparently Captain Cully and his outlaws are so bungling themselves that they actually have to pay protection money to the mayor of the nearby town so that he doesn't come and arrest them all.
Well, it's a far cry from Robin Hood having mead and venison in the forest to struggling with rat soup.
I do
It's a
I do
completely
think
different image.
I do think it's way more successful than the Lord of the Rings, the Ralph Bakshi, and also the Black Cauldron, which have, similar elements. I think the characters are more likable. It's just more pleasing to watch as far as the animation and the music and so if you think of it in context of other fantasy stories of the time, this is way more enjoyable to watch, in my opinion.
Well, let's wrap it up here with our final thoughts on the film, and then we'll take a quick break. Matthew, your final thoughts on The Last Unicorn from 1982?
Just and stop me if you've heard this before. It's a beautiful film. Uh, it's a beautiful film. It's definitely, I think, a vibes movie, in the best way. And I don't necessarily love it the same way today that I did as I was a kid, but that's okay. And I appreciate the vibes. And yeah, I really like it. I'm happy that it exists. And before we go, I just also wanted to say I totally forgot to bring up the fact that Renee Auberjonois has the best single role in the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
He's so
talking
good.
skeleton is pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's so good. Oh, he's
Rachel, how about you? Your final thoughts on the
I
film?
I think go back to 1982 and enjoy the beautiful animation, the fantasy story, and it's just something unique. And so many of the animated films that we have now feel like, okay, this feels exactly the same of so many other films, and it's refreshing to see something that just feels unique.
Tony, you gonna unique up on us as something different?
Yeah, probably not in this case. Yeah, yeah. This is a really like beautiful fantasy film. I can see it. Yeah, said it, but I can imagine this would be actually a great introduction to fantasy for people through having this more fairy tale logic and like to telling all some parts and being a good gateway to more serious fantasy bits. There's really great ideas about in here about mortality and uh, getting used to like the nature of emotion and feeling. And uh, yeah, just really interesting film to like to watch. Yeah, the animation, yeah, it does feel a bit cheaper at parts, but it's still really impressive as an art style. And yeah, just as a overall experience is yeah. If you if you vibe along with it and just let yourself get swept up in the fairy tale atmosphere, it's a really like enjoyable film to watch and absorb.
And Bubbawheat.
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much be echoing what I said at the beginning. I love this film. It's gorgeous. I love practically all the characters, all the little side characters and side moments, and Mommy Fortuna's carnival, and her horrific end as well. Just something in a G-rated film is kind of incredible to look back on from a modern perspective. And yeah, just the everything and until it does kind of hit that slight stumbling block once they get to the castle. But the everything around it is just fabulous. And I'm definitely colored by nostalgia, but I still think that there's enough here worth recommending to just about anyone, especially if you're someone that loves a good fantasy story.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. My thoughts are pretty straightforward. I think this is a movie that is weird, but while I was watching it, I was enjoying the heck out of it and was astounded by how attractive it looked and how well it was framed and the images were integrated and the colors were lively. We went through that whole routine at the beginning of our discussion about the way the movie looks, and I think the things that are off-putting to me don't matter at all as I'm watching the movie. It's only when I think about it afterwards that I think, what the heck did I just see? Uh, but watching it, I'm very satisfied and enjoying it, and I would strongly recommend it to people, even if you are put off a little bit by some of the Shortcuts in animation, and the vocal performances and even the appropriateness of the music, you're still going to have a very good time, and I think you'll be impressed with what you're watching. Well, I want to thank everybody for your thoughts there. We're going to take a quick break to hear from a fellow Lamb Podcasting Network show, and then we'll be back with our exit question of the week.
Hello, I am Aaron Newworth. I am a film critic and the editor-in-chief at We Live Entertainment. I host the podcast Out Now with Aaron and Abe, and I am a big Godzilla fan.
Hi, my name is Terrence Johnson. I am a film critic as well at lenoirauteur.net, and I have seen some Godzilla movies.
And together, we've decided we're starting a podcast called Two Black Guys Talk Godzilla. It's going to be a bi-weekly podcast, as in twice a month.
Yes.
Where Terrence and I will go over the entire Godzilla franchise.
Yeah. This is what do they call these things? Labors of love.
Yeah, exactly.
Labors of love.
We're back, and it's time for the exit question of the week. Look, people were nostalgic about today's film. Most of the people who saw this experienced it as a child, as part of their background, and they watched it in home video performances, and they're soaked in their childhood memories. So I thought maybe we should be talking about other childhood memories for this week's exit question. It's pretty straightforward. What are your favorite animated films from childhood? And what's your favorite non-animated film from the same period of time? Because let's face it, our formative years from, let's say, infancy to about the time that we start high school, we're going to get exposed to a lot of things, some of which are good, some of which are bad, but many of which linger in our memories as being important. So, Rachel, let's start with you. What's your favorite animated film from childhood? And then we'll get to your favorite non-animated film afterwards.
Yeah. So my favorite animated film from childhood is without a doubt The Little Mermaid. That came out when I was 8, and it really changed everything for me. I mean, I knew every line, I knew every song. I mean, we hadn't had a princess movie in so long, and so it was just so exciting. Of course, I've watched Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, but to get to go and see The Little Mermaid, and of course, being the independent person I was, I really related to Ariel and her angst and all of that. So yeah, The Little Mermaid was what I thought of. As far as live action, the probably the most iconic live action film. I mean, I did think of The Princess Bride. That would be up there for me. But also from that time period, definitely Home Alone would be the biggest one. It was the first comedy that I ever really loved. I remember going to see it. It was just before I turned 10 with my grandparents. I was on a special trip and just dying laughing, just thinking it was the funniest movie I'd ever seen. And I still love it to this day. I still love Little Mermaid to this day. I think those would be the most iconic films of my childhood.
Well, it's so obvious how influential The Little Mermaid was. It was really the start of the Disney Renaissance, and
Yeah,
it was a breakthrough for everybody. The quality of the songs, the animation, the look of the film, it really felt like people were in charge of animation again at Disney. People who
yeah.
cared about what was going on rather than just producing product. They were producing something that they wanted to be fantastic and beautiful. And you know what? I watch Home Alone probably every Christmas, and I think, oh yeah, I gotta watch Home Alone. And then I watch it and I think, my gosh, this movie holds up much
It
better
really
than I
does.
thought.
And the booby traps are really actually a pretty small part of the movie. They're not in it as much as you think when you go back and watch it. Of course, it is a very violent film, but it's actually also quite sweet. And I was a very independent child, so that the idea of being alone and taking care of myself, that was very appealing to me as a kid. Like, leave, please leave. And so, yeah, I think there's an escapist factor that is really fun about the story for kids.
I can see that for sure.
Yeah.
Matthew, how about you? What's your favorite animated and favorite live action film from your childhood?
So my favorite animated film from my childhood is I mentioned before we had a VHS tape that my dad made that we basically wore out with a couple of animated films on it. And my favorite animated film is one that was on that tape as well. So closely associated with The Last Unicorn for me. And it is also 1982 film called The Flight of Dragons, which is a story about the uh, a flight of dragons. It's about a quest to stop an evil wizard from taking over the world, and it also resolves via a collision between magic and science. And if you haven't seen it, it's very 1980s with a very 1980s voice cast, and I highly recommend it to you all. Um, my favorite, I've had a hard time trying to decide what to say is my favorite live action film from when I was a kid. Um, but I think I have to go. I'm going to cheat and say two. One, I'm going to say Airplane because Airplane is to this day my favorite movie. And I first saw it when I was probably about 7 or 8. And obviously, I think it's hilarious now for different reasons than I thought it was when when I was 7 or 8. Um, but it's weirdly, it's probably Top Gun. Uh, for very specific reasons. One, and that reason is that when I was a kid, I'm from a fairly large family, and me and my sister are the youngest in our sort of generation of cousins by a fairly big gap. And Top Gun was the film that I was allowed to watch with my like teenage cousins when I was a child. So I have like very close personal association with that film. Um, and I've seen it more times than can be counted, probably. And yeah, so very, very personal reasons why. Um, and also, and this is true, that movie's awesome. So yeah, I mean it's a bit America Oorah 1980s military industrial propaganda, but it's my 1980s military industrial propaganda.
Yeah.
Are you looking forward to Top Gun 3?
Of course I am. Top Gun Maverick is amazing. I can't wait for
Yeah.
another one.
That was a miracle of a movie
Yeah.
And
that it
timing on
turned
that
out
was
as
perfect, yes.
good as it did.
Oh,
Unbelievable.
Matthew, since you mentioned Airplane is your favorite movie, I've got to ask if you get the joke about the guy in the cab.
Yes.
There's so many people who see that movie and they don't know the reference because they weren't there in that time period, so it doesn't mean anything to them.
Yes. It's yeah. I have done like I've looked up so many jokes in that film because I know that like obviously that movie came out in 1980. I was born in 81, so obviously there was a ton of stuff I didn't get as a kid. But then yeah, when I was an adult, I'd be like, what does this even mean? And I would go back and look up a lot of the sort of pop culture references that I missed from the 60s and 70s. So yes.
Yes, well, Proposition 13 was still fresh in everybody's mind in 1980, even though it had passed 2 years earlier because that, tax revolution had taken place. And him just sitting in the back of the car and putting up with the meter running just was so funny to me. So funny to me.
I mean, it's just funny even divorced from that though, like that he would just sit there and let the meter run is just like it's one of my favorite kinds of jokes in that film, which again, I could talk about this for hours, and I think we did on the Lambcast at one point, so I won't do it now. But there's so many jokes in that film that are like low-key background jokes that I think are some of the funniest things in the movie.
There's always something new, something that you'll notice. You say, "Oh, I didn't notice that before."
Hmm.
Bubba Wheat, we're back to you.
Well, let's see if you can notice a pattern here. I honestly, I probably would say that my favorite animated movie from childhood is The Last Unicorn, but since we talk so much about that, I will go with, potentially my second favorite, which is The Secret of Nim, which is, Don Bluth animation, another non, one of the few non-Disneys around this time. And that one, a lot of the same things can be said about that movie and this movie. Like that's another gorgeous movie, and it also has some like really dark elements in it. About a mother using this magic necklace to save her child. Who's almost drowning in the scary wise owl that's giving her information, and even though he could very easily eat the mouse, and just these intelligent rats, and everything about that movie is really fantastic. And then as far as live action, I would probably go with Return to Oz, which is another dark fantasy kids movie that's a young Fairuza Balk, and a much darker take on the Oz stories, with Mombi and the Wheelers and the Gnome King, and that is just such a visually striking
And Nicole
movie.
Williamson giving electroshock therapy.
Yes. And swapping heads out, and another I
Yes.
talked about the unicorn moment. That is very similar to this movie has its Dorothy Gale moment.
Something that's going to strike you and remind you constantly of that particular movie. I like it.
Yeah.
Tony, we're down to you. So, what's your favorite animated and what's your favorite live action film from your childhood?
So, animated film from in terms of well, first thing with Cheese Answer was I think I mentioned video recordings, and for nostalgia reasons, I'll have to give a bit of a shout out to a video that my granddad recorded, which had Robin Hood, The Sword in the Stone, and The Jungle Book on it. So those ones always have nostalgia for me. But really thinking about it, the one I have to go with is Chicken Run. And I already did the movie the one for a few years ago now, going over exactly how much I love Chicken Run and just art and animation just in general, and the artistry, the charm of all Armin's films in that area, like Chicken Run and Wallace and Gromit, all that stuff. It was just really hit me at exactly right time to really have a proper impact on me when I was growing up. In terms of live action, it's one of it's sort of a bit thinking of, but more think about it, more end up the choice being the Danny DeVito adaptation of Matilda. I love the nostalgia just for the story in general, listening to the audio book on car journeys all the time with my family. And actually watching the film, it's even though like American, like fairly Americanized with like Danny DeVito in the cast in the American setting, it just hits everything I needed as an adaptation of Matilda. That's right. That's how it captures the spirit of Roald Dahl's novel, like the darkness and the comedy and the humor, and the sense of power and nature at the end. Pam Ferris will always be how I imagine Trunchbull. Even like watching the musical adaptation that both on stage and the film version with Emma Thompson. Like all the other performances of Trunchbull have been, Pam Ferris just is Trunchbull. She's the definitive version of that character. One of the great villains of family films. And you just talk of Roald Dahl. It was also very close second with was Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, watching that on video. But yeah, Matilda is the one that ultimately is my favorite childhood live action film.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, I'm obviously of a slightly older generation than you guys. In fact, childhood films didn't exist on video for me. There wasn't any video. When we wanted to re-experience a film, we either had to wait until it showed up on you know, The Wonderful World of Color on Disney, or one of their re-releases every 7 years, and that was, a thing. That's the way the world operated. My favorite animated film from when I was a kid is, Tony just mentioned it's The Jungle Book. Um, and one of the reasons I think it became a favorite is because the way I re-experienced it was typical in that time period. I had the soundtrack, and you listen to the record over and over and over again, and those songs would get in my head. And Phil Harris doing the bare necessities, Louis Prima, I want to be like you. uh, and there's just so many great moments in that movie, and the songs made it live in my head. And I think I was 9 when it came out, and it was just one of those things that uh, my friends and I we would listen to the record and sing along, and it was one of those things that I could remember really well. And let's face it, some of those songs are great. The Bare Necessities is just cool. And I recognize a couple of the actors in their performances. Sebastian Cabot was, Mr. French on Family Affair, which I had watched as a kid on TV, so I knew his voice, and it was warm and familiar to me, and I appreciated that he was the voice of Bagheera, and so it was something that was easy for me to embrace. And even though there have been many, many fabulous animated movies since then, and that I love and admire, and I can see are clearly superior in a lot of ways. If I was making a list of favorites, that would be one that would still be near the top. As a favorite kids movie, though, that's the one I would think of. For non-animated films, I got to tell you, I have a whole bunch of films that were important to me that were not children's movies. And I started thinking about those, and I'm going, I don't want to get into all of that again. There were science fiction films and spy movies. Let's face it, James Bond is in this time period, and I don't really think of those as the kinds of a childhood movie, even though that's when I saw them. But one that I know is kind of built for children and still had that adult sensibility to it that I could say is maybe my favorite from that era that's non-animated is Robinson Crusoe on Mars, which I saw in a theater in South Pasadena. It was an old, movie palace that the theater is still there. It's in disrepair. I hope someday somebody finds the millions of dollars that it would take to put it back in shape. The Rialto Theater. I have a lot of memories from watching movies there, and uh, Robinson Crusoe on Mars was really my introduction to the Robinson Crusoe story, and so it interested me, and it had a monkey in it. And when you're a kid, a movie with a monkey, you get extra points for that. So that's one of the things that stood out about it. And I like the space setting, and it has a great look to it, and it holds up pretty well. I've saw it not too long ago. I have a very nice copy of it that I enjoy watching every once in a while. But from my childhood, that would be one.
The other
Is it?
one for me would be The Sound of Music. I watched that on like repeat as a kid, which is very
Oh
strange,
yeah,
but it's
yeah. No,
true.
the Sound of Music was. My grandmother took me to see it, and I only saw it the one time when I was young, and it took me many, many years later to appreciate it. And now I think, you get to
So
that
good.
jaded point when you're a teenager, you say, "Oh, I can't watch The Sound of Music. That's not for me." And then there's this point at which you become an adult and you say, "Yes, it is.
Yeah,
I'm going to enjoy
absolutely.
this again." All right. Well, let me thank everybody again for your opinions, and I always appreciate it when people share personal stories on the Lambcast. I want to give you a chance to talk about anything that you think people might like to turn their eyes and ears to. So, Tony, let's start with you. Have you got something fresh and new, or something old and wrinkled that you would like to refer people to?
Yeah, Doug and I just repeating like stuff I always talk about with the podcast I've done. Over on my site, Goose Reviews have recently done a review of the Super Mario Galaxy movie, planning to get one done for the Magic Faraway Tree, and then this week going to spend a few days at the Forbidden Worlds Film Festival in Bristol, so hoping to get a post up about my experience of that.
Forbidden Worlds, how many things have you got scheduled to see when you're there?
So I've got five films scheduled. Actually, speaking of mentioned Nicol Williamson earlier, big event I'm seeing on Thursday evening is a screening of Excalibur, introduced by armorer Terry English.
Oh, excellent.
Oh, that'll be
Excellent.
great. I just bought the new 4K of that from Arrow,
Yeah,
and let me tell you,
yeah.
it
That
is
that's the
stunning.
that's the print they're using they're showing that restoration on on an
Yeah.
IMAX screen.
You're
I'm
in for
with
a treat.
Matthew. Apparently, we shop the same places 'cause I think I watched it last week when we just got it. So good, good. Matthew, you got something fresh, new?
Yeah, my latest project, which you mentioned at the top of the show, thank you for that, is Northern Reel, which is a site dedicated to the cinema and television and talent of Canada. So um, it's early days still, but it's going really well. We're posting reviews of Canadian film, of which there's way more than you think. I've had a couple of really great interviews with Canadian talent, which have gone really well, including just last week. This past week, Wednesday was National Canadian Film Day, which is a big nationwide event. So we had a bunch of coverage. We have streaming guides for all the current Canadian Screen Award nominees, and I got to interview a personal favorite Canadian actor, Colm Feore, which I thought went really well. And yeah, I'm kind of rambling about it because I'm very excited because it's going really well. So check out northernreel.ca for everything you need for Canadian film. I'm having a blast doing it.
Excellent. Rachel, how about you? What's new in your world?
Yeah, well, I have been starting at Rachel's Reviews every Friday. I've been gathering usually two of my friends to do Friday Flicks. And so we talk about all of the weekend's new releases. And I'm super proud of the show. And so if you are interested in movies or what's going on, and you just like to hear interesting, cool people talk about these things, then you should definitely check that out on Fridays. It's live streamed on Utah and then post on YouTube and then posted on the on Hallmarkies and on Rachel's Reviews on the podcast. And then Hallmarkies, we have a lot of fun stuff going on. There's Spring Into Love on Hallmark Channel that we're covering. The start of the show, The Way Home, season 4. And we just finished up When Calls the Heart, season 13. So lots of fun stuff going on at Hallmarkies podcast. And yeah, so follow me there.
Excellent. Check it out, folks. Bubbawheat, which one of those podcast projects are you promoting this week? Yeah, and you're certainly welcome to promote them all.
Well, yeah, I currently have, three active projects right now. I still have or I've returned to my superhero movie blog, Flights, Tights, and Movie Nights, where I've been I finished catching up with all the MCU movies that I missed over the past couple of years. And I've also hit a few, old oddities like an old Shadow movie from the 50s and a bizarre martial arts action movie called Catman in Lethal Track. Um, I also have my anthological podcast, which comes out every Wednesday, and we are right in the middle of Sin City. We've covered the four segments of the first Sin City movie, and we're about to cover each segment of Sin City: A Dame to Kill For, and each week is a completely different set of hosts. I typically only show up once per movie in that, as where you can hear my voice, and I edit all of those. And then another project, which I'm not sure if I mentioned, but it's called An Oral History of Movies by Minutes. And that is my newest project that's been going on since roughly November of last year. And every other Thursday there is this kind of subgenre within a subgenre of movie podcasts where people take a movie and break it down 1 minute at a time. So it was started by Star Wars. Well, it was popularized by Star Wars Minutes, which came out back in 2013. And they've inspired, hundreds of other podcasters to do the same thing with, hundreds of different movies. And I've gone back to the beginning and I've done this interview series where I've talked to these creators and what inspired them, and it's really a lot about creativity and their histories and about what it takes to make a podcast. So I think even if you're not specifically interested in this subgenre of breaking a movie down 1 minute at a time, I still think that this is an interesting podcast to listen to, and a lot of the people that I've talked to have been really fascinating uh, to get their stories of how they started podcasting and how they discovered this specific niche of movie podcasting.
If you did that by the minute, you'd be doing it for the rest of your life. Oh my goodness. Well, that sounds like it's quite daunting, and hopefully you have a lot of luck with it. Where can we find that?
Just do a Google search for an oral history of movies by minutes, or you can also, I believe, I mean, we're also part of the Rabbit Hole Podcasting Network, which you can find at rabbitholepodcasts.com.
Excellent.
And
Okay, I'll find the link and make sure to post it because that sounds very interesting to me.
yeah, I'm
Eh,
currently like 12, almost 12 episodes in, and it's been really fantastic.
Good. Myself, I'm thankful that I finally caught up with all the movies that I've seen in the theater, which means I apparently haven't been to the movies for a couple of weeks because otherwise I'd have never caught up. So I have reviews up, brief reviews of things that I saw recently. Ready or Not 2, for instance. I also had a screening of Almost Famous that I attended that I enjoyed quite a bit, checking in on that film again. It's been a long time. I'm getting ready to start a new project on the Lambcast. It's basically, we're going to call it Shepherd's Pie. I'm going to do a monthly drop of a video on a James Bond story, and we're going to do the films in order that they came out, and it's going to include a visual essay on the Bond films, talk about the culture at the time that the film came out, and there's also going to be a discussion where it's relevant for the films, for the Bond films that have a book that they are based on. And so I'll be revisiting those. So anybody who is interested in doing a book-based discussion, I'd encourage people to participate in this process. I'm going to do a monthly drop on the 007th of the month every month for the next 25 months. So hopefully that'll lead us up to a time when we're getting a new Bond film coming in. We'll see how close I've got it timed out to that. I don't know, but I would like anybody who has some Bond material on Dr. No to be ready to send it to me so that I can post it all together on May the 7th this coming month. So I would appreciate any assistance on that. But regardless of whether other people participate, you're going to get something from me on the 7th of every month for the next 2 years. Uh, and I've mentioned to people before that I'm doing a lot of traveling in the following 5 weeks. Matthew's going to take over a podcast for me in a couple of weeks, and uh, Aaron Newworth is going to do one for me. I think I'm going to have to skip one that's coming up later on. It's just a busy time of the year. But one of the things that I am traveling for is the TCM Film Festival, starting at the end of April. And I'll be there for the 4 days of the festival, and I'll try to do posts during the festival for films that I'm going to be seeing, including Barefoot in the Park. Um, I'm conflicted between seeing Strangers on a Train and there's something, Dangerous Liaisons. I have to pick between those two. Uh, and I'm always looking forward to the Baron and Bert presentation. They do a fabulous job of talking about the technical things behind films, and they're doing The Towering Inferno this year, so it should be a lot of fun there. Well, I want to thank all of my guests for showing up this week. As usual, the Lambcast community depends on all of you folks being a part of the process, and I'm happy that people are still willing to talk about movies that they love and even sometimes movies that they don't care much for. But fortunately, this week that was not the case. Everybody seemed to enjoy themselves. So, when the wine drinks itself and the skull speaks, and when the clock strikes the right time, only then will you find the tunnel that leads to the Red Bull. And remember, it won't give you wings. Thanks, everybody.
You've been listening to the Lambcast. If you have an idea for a show or would like to join us on the Lambcast, contact us at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Find us on Facebook, just search for Lambcast, or on X, formerly Twitter, at Lambcast. And you can find us on YouTube as well. The Lamb site can be found at largeassmovieblogs.com. We'd also love it if you would leave a review on iTunes.